fans of Yin, and we wanted to build a class to show everyone the kind of complement that Yin could be to your daily life. And honestly, what it could be used for as almost preventative medicine when it comes to injury and common injuries that we might experience. It's also a wonderful thing to do for the nervous system, and just calming down and relaxing and getting ready for bed. And in every class, we kind of like to pick a little bit of anatomy that we're going to be working on, just to give you the option for when you're in the poses, if you wanted to think about what your muscles are doing or meditate on what you're stretching or what you're compressing, to give you that kind of opportunity and just, you know, expand our knowledge of the body and of muscles and joints. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So today I wanted to talk about, I talked about this muscle a couple weeks ago, but I kind of want to revisit it because I like it and I've expanded on what I like about it. So we're going to talk about the sartorius muscle. So the sartorius is actually the longest muscle in the body, but it's only about 2 finger widths wide. As you could see on the picture here, it attaches to the top of the hip bone, the ASIS. So when you're feeling on your own hips, it's going to be on that bony prominence right here at the top, that big bone. That's where the muscle begins. Its tendons attached there. And then it goes all the way around, kind of wraps around into the medial in the inside of the knee. So I'll stop the share really fast and just pin myself. So here we are. Starts right here at the top of the hip, and then it goes kind of like in this wrap around to the inside of the knee. Its main actions are to flex both the hip and the knee at the same time. A really common pose that uses sartorius in yoga is lotus. Right here, both the knee is flexed and the hip is flexed, and the muscle itself is shortening. So we know if the muscle goes over the knee and attaches at the hip, it's responsible for 2 hip, it's going over 2 joints. So that's another thing we might want to be like aware of in our practice, is this muscle isn't just determining what our hip is doing, it's also determining what our knee is doing simultaneously. And when we think about injury, that's another kind of way to deduce what's going on. So going back to sharing the screen. We also use this muscle to cross our legs and uncross our legs when we're in a seat, So here's some fun facts that I kind of pulled up. So the average length of the sartorius muscle is 19 inches, the longest muscle in the body. But interestingly enough, most of the muscle fibers of the sartorius don't run through the entire length of the muscle belly. So only about 30% of the muscle fibers are 19 inches long. Most of the muscle fibers in here are 13 to 17 inches, and they just kind of weave their way in and out of the fascia. But I think that's kind of cool that, it's not just like one big giant muscle fiber. It's actually a lot of shorter ones that make it up. It's the only muscle of the thigh that bends both the hip and the knee. So it's the only muscle in your upper thigh that does that action, both at the hip and the knee. And then most injuries to this muscle are found at the attachment below the knee. So the attachment at the knee actually merges with one of the hamstring tendons, the semitendinosus tendon. So it merges with the hamstring and it merges with the gracilis. So, which is another big hip flexor and a external rotator. And so if any one of those muscles, the hamstring, the gracilis, or the sartorius pulls or is inflamed at the knee, you're going to have kind of multiple muscles you're working with in that injury. All right, and then for our class today, so the poses we're going to be doing that stretch the sartorius muscle, this big muscle, is dragon pose. So if a muscle does hip flexion, it's going to stretch it by doing the opposite, hip extension. So dragon pose is an action of hip extension. And then we're also going to stretch it in deer. Deer stag. It's going to be a nice, one of our last poses. And then the poses that use and engage sartorius. So when we use a muscle, it actually shortens and contracts rather than stretch. And the muscles we're going to use that, or the poses we're going to do that in are butterfly with a forward fold and half pigeon. So in both of those, we're actually going to be shortening sartorius and stretching the muscles, probably on the other side of the thigh and into the hip. But yeah, that's that beautiful muscle. It's really like not, I don't know, it's not big in mass, but it's long, and so it often gets overlooked because the big massive muscles kind of take up most of the feeling and sensation, but it's a really powerful muscle when you use it both in lotus position and just in any kind of hip flexion, walking. All right, I'll pepper in a little bit more anatomy and teach a little bit, but I will pass it off to Greta.
Awesome. Thank you for that more thorough. I remember when you were talking about it a couple weeks ago, but I feel like I understand it better now. So thank you. So finding a comfortable seat if you weren't already in one, and just taking a moment to settle. Release tension you might be holding in your forehead or your jaw, neck, shoulders, glutes. Let any of that go. And then take a second to feel the connection between your ankles and the glutes. Also feeling the spaces, feeling where it's heavy, feeling where it's light, and then feeling the lengthening of your spine. So just taking a moment to ground and to come into practice, acknowledging transition kind of out of more of like a learning role and into like an embodied receptive practice. And we'll start class with 3 rounds of Om. And we chant Om to connect us through resonance, sound, and vibration. And I miss hearing people Om, and I haven't done this in a long time, but if you wanted to unmute yourself, you can totally unmute yourself for Om and then mute again after. There's no pressure also. I know sometimes it's just easier to stay muted. There's no like echoing going on. But finding a comfortable seat, relaxing the shoulders, and we'll do 1 clearing breath and 3 round together. Inhale in through the nose. Exhale, HA. Release, let that go. And this time, prepare for Om. Inhale. Inhale to breathe in. And exhale, release the breath out. And for those of you who unmuted, thank you. It was nice to hear. And we'll start class today with soles of the feet to touch. Kind of coming into a, I guess I'll scoot back here, a butterfly shape, Baddha Konasana. And with Baddha Konasana, definitely leaving a generous distance in between your heels and your pelvis. Oftentimes in yoga practice, they'll be pretty close, but we want to invite a generous distance. And then deciding if you want to add a little extra tilt to your pelvis. I've been liking to roll my yoga mat under. It just kind of helps tilt my pelvic bowl down, and then slowly inviting a fold into the torso. Rounding is absolutely okay here. Letting the head hang heavy. You may get down there and realize that you want to support yourself a little bit extra with a pillow, or maybe a block, or maybe a couple pillows might be nice. And I'm going to go ahead and set a timer. And I'm also going to talk briefly about Yin. And Yin Yoga, Veronica already did such a wonderful job talking about the sartorius muscle and how Yin can really be just such a preventative remedy for the shrink wrapping of our muscles. It also helps with regeneration of bone growth. And it also prevents fixation, which is like eventually, like over time, the bones could become fused if they're not being mobile in between joints. And fixation is like the release, like the cracks and the pops you hear. That's also fixation. And I'm not really sure how I just started talking about fixation when I was going to go into the tenets of Yin. But fixation is also, if you picture like a coaster, like a frothy coaster that maybe had like beer in it, and underneath there's a cup holder and it gets stuck to the bottom. It could happen really with any beverage. And then the moment it releases, like that's kind of what fixation is too in the body. So we're doing a lot of really good things to keep the range of motion in your body and accessing the connective tissue and the fascia and the bones and the ligaments. And connective tissue is right underneath the surface of the skin, very similar to the white fuzzy part of orange, or like a clementine or a tangelo, all the good citrus they've got right now. But it's also the casing around the orange. So we're getting into all of that through these long holds. And it's a different intention than we approach muscles. Muscles want repetition, they want movement, and that's kind of the opposite of what we're doing here. So in terms of energetically, the qualities we're inviting in, we want it to be passive, we want it to be yielding, and I also find this practice to be very regenerative. It can be kind of nourishing, and it's also like a great way to come together in community when we still are so far apart and we're in different states. Like there's several states here, and it kind of still feels like we are practicing together. I don't know what it is about being kind of just like slow and floppy that makes it feel stronger. And there are three tenets, there are three tattvas, there are three pillars to this practice. And the first is to find your gentle edge. And we already did that with this pose, and we're at the halfway mark. Really, the most important thing is to be able to sustain and hold the pose for time. And we hold most of our poses anywhere between like 3 to 8 minutes usually is what we go for, like the longest holds. So when you get into the posture being like, okay, like this is my range of motion, like I can definitely do this, but like can I hold it for time? And if you're like, probably not, maybe pulling the edge back, or like grabbing a pillow, or grabbing like a couch cushion or a blanket or a towel. Like there's so many good props, especially like in our home environments, that we can incorporate into the practice. So finding gentle edge, being still is the second one. If you're invited to go deeper into the practice, absolutely go deeper, follow your edge. Please, please never experience any pain. We never want you experiencing any burning, sharp, daggery sensations. And if you are just trying to access the intention of the pose in another way, taking a variation, adding a prop, we even want to avoid tingling, because if repeated, it could cause nerve damage. And then lastly, we hold for time. We're on our final minute. We like to give halfway marks and final minute marks. And this is really for you to feel a little bit safer. It can be really easy to lose track of time when you're in a yin pose and be like, okay, like we're halfway there. Like, oh, 1 minute, like maybe I actually want to ditch this pill that I've been using. So just using those as check-in points and as a tool to more easily surrender into the practice, like we're keeping track of time. That is not something you have to worry about. And then lastly, being with yourself in a state of gentleness and kindness. I think if I'm not mindful about my quietness and my stillness practice, my mind can be very restless and loud. And I don't say this to like project it on you, but if I'm not in that kind of state of like awareness where I'm trying to practice like non-judgment and like I'm not trying to fix anything, it can be pretty dramatic and dark in there. So just like giving yourself some kindness, like it doesn't have to be that way. Trying to turn towards it with a little bit more compassion, or whatever is a word that kind of sits well with you. I know words like kindness and compassion can bring up feelings of resistance with people, but peeling the layers back until you find a word that feels authentic and genuine in your experience. We're on our last few moments here of this forward fold. And gently begin to lift the head, neck, and chest, elevating the torso, unfurling your spine, and taking as much time as you need to. You can absolutely move slow, like do any movement that your body is craving with the release, make any sign noises that you need, and then close the knees like you would close a book. And from here, I'm going to offer a windshield by bringing the legs right to left, left to right. And then coming back to a neutral stance, glutes on the ground. We're going to work our way into shoelace pose. And we're going to start with the right leg up and over the left leg. And I am wearing kind of dark clothing, so I hope that my legs are visible. But the right leg is kind of, I just traced it kind of with my hand, and the left leg is under. If you get here and you're like, whoa, that is a lot in my left knee, extend the left leg out long, and you're going to get all the same benefits by having the left leg extended. And actually, you'd get a hamstring stretch that way, so if you wanted to do it. The right leg is up and over, and maybe this leg is like, ooh, really high up here. You can support the right leg with a pillow. You can support it with a block. So just taking whatever necessary measures. And we're going to invite this into a fold. And you're welcome to tack on a layer here with the arms. Sometimes the arms become too much for me with already I've got this leg thing going on and I'm folding and it's just like my shoulders can chill. But you could here, if you wanted to take eagle arms, or if you just wanted to grasp for opposite elbow, like if you're going to give yourself like a nice long embrace and then fold forward. Every time I do this, I have like a flashback to this like one kid I went to school with, and he was like, I'm making out with myself. Do you remember that kid? And like they would like show you their back. Anyway, yes, that would be the arm grip. Or skip the arm grip and then just bring the head down and support the chest with your head. Maybe that kid was you in your middle school. There's nothing wrong with that kid. It was pretty funny. Okay. And we're going to be here for 5 minutes, and then we're going to switch the legs and then do 5 minutes on the other side. This class, we've definitely had some divergent things that we've done. We did spine time. We did the octopus class last week. This class is actually the ball and socket class. So ball and socket joints are shoulder and also your hips. So thinking about those two joints, they have the greatest range of motion in terms of joints in your body. And you don't have to like overly fixate on that information. It often feels really good to release the shoulders and the hips. They tend to be areas where we hold perhaps anxiety or emotion. So if any of that comes up for you in this practice today, that honestly is a part of this reflection, this study. Sometimes in that stillness that you're creating, sometimes something will come up, and that's just because you're finally giving yourself the time to listen, and it may not even make sense to you. So if there is like an emotional release, like know that that is something that a lot of people experience, and it's kind of your body processing emotions. And then I guess lastly, I should say yin is practiced mostly in silence. So I'm actually going to cease my chatter and leave us to have this kind of meditation, if you will, for 5 minutes. Halfway point. And this is the final minute. Maybe just thinking about the sartorius. There is so much imagery in the presentation, just imagining like the tip of your hip and then it winding down. And I didn't know that bit about it. The muscle, it's almost like kind of layered, like different pieces are like 13 inches or 17 inches, but it all adds up to 19 inches. So just trying to sense that experience, even if it's just through your imagination. And slowly over the next few breaths, 5 breaths or so, I was going to say 10 seconds, then you'd have to count. Begin to lift your head, chest, unfurl the spine. Coming back to a sense of neutral, feeling your glutes connect with the ground. And then unthread your legs. And I'm going to do some windshield brightering right to left with my legs as a form of release. You are welcome to experiment with what might feel good in your body as a sense of release. Sometimes the suggested release is like not at all what you're craving, which is just why I say that. If it's not what you're craving, I would definitely do that movement. And then bringing the knees back towards center and preparing for the other side. So this time bringing left leg up and over right and noticing this side. This side feels totally different. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it feels like a very similar experience. my left side, I found in this practice to be much tighter. So maybe you need the pillow on this side and you did it on the other, and that's totally okay. Our bodies do a lot of actions for us, and sometimes the motions are repetitive. It could be if you're a barista, tamping over and over again, or if you scooped ice cream, that one muscle will become really strong. So many different variations. I could do a million examples. You get the point. So just honoring the difference from side to side. It's okay, they're not the same. And adding the arm variation, maybe doing opposite shoulder if you're into the arm variation. And this is the halfway point on this side. And maybe using that same imagery or sensation to zero in on the sartorius. Part of the reason we have this muscle introduction at the beginning is so like you really can familiarize yourself with this part of your body. It's so cool. And it's such a more, it makes a lot more sense to me than just like studying like a picture or like filling in some like names. It's like really connecting this like random word sartorius to the sensation that's going on in the leg. Final minute. And slowly discern how you would like to lift the head. Maybe kind of strategize, moving gently, moving softly. Unthread the legs and take any release that you need to here. It may be different than what you did before. Maybe windshield wipering up the legs. Any sensation that's going to bring you just a sense of release. And Veronica is going to guide us through the next part of class.
Yes, thank you, Greta. All right, so let's get more into our hips. So from our seat, let's go to our hands and knees in a tabletop position. Once you find yourself here in tabletop, begin to work into the spine with flexion and extension, cat-cows. Inhales for the cows and exhales for the cats as you kind of tuck the tailbone in. And really take any other movement that the spine is feeling good for. You might want to stretch out a leg, shake it out, go in some circles. And our next pose is dragon. So for dragon, it looks a lot like a lunge in vinyasa. We're gonna start with our left foot. Let's start with our right foot forward and our left foot back here. And so this is dragon. Now, if you get here and immediately you're like, ow, this hurts, simply move back a little bit out. Right now, today, my knees, particularly my left knee, has been really hurting. So I'm gonna pat it down with a towel underneath here. And then also for dragon, when you're in this pose, you can have your hands resting inside the leg. You can perch yourself up top to get a really deep stretch, or you can kind of bring them stacked joints and rest in whatever. Doesn't have to be super exaggerated. It could be back here. And that's all fine. Remember, we don't want to have anything super painful, just where we can hold for 3 minutes. And once you find the dragon or lizard that's suiting you, take a deep breath in, and this is a giant stretch of the sartorius, which we talked about earlier. So you can almost, maybe start on the inside of the knee. See if you can kind of visualize where it is, maybe on your left leg, the one that's touching the ground. And it slinks all the way over the front of the thigh to connect to the outside of the hip bone. And right now it should be getting a nice big stretch. This is a little bit more of an intense hip flexor pose. And I remember the first time I was in this pose in Yin, I was like, oh my God, the world might as well be ending. And maybe I was just a little too deep in it, but I've learned to really love it. It's a big, nice opening of the hip flexors, especially if you've been sitting for a long period of time. Really gets into those muscles that are shortened when you're sitting. We're here at our halfway point. The head, you can hang the head, or I prefer a straighter spine. I just kind of keep my head up, and you can hang it low and shake it out to relax it. Right. Coming out of dragon, I like to press off my right foot to come back onto this leg and slowly just sit down onto it. Maybe take a nice neck roll since we have to support our necks just now for 3 minutes. Allowing free movement. Maybe coming into tabletop, doing a few more cat-cows. Maybe you already have a prop in mind that you want to get for the next side, the other side. Go ahead and move on to the next side. So left leg comes out in front. I'm going to go ahead and pad my right knee, just out of precaution. And these sides are going to feel very different. As Greta said earlier, no two sides are the same. So just, work with what you have and get into the pose that you can be in for time. Started the timer. Another thing you could do is take some blocks or a pillow and rest on the pillow like that if you really want to get deep into the stretch. With your forearms on the pillow. Also, if there is pinching at the top of the thigh, which I just noticed on myself, so I felt a little pinch in my left hip flexor right at the crease where my thigh meets my hip bone, you can place a pillow right there too and lean onto that pillow for a little more support, and so there's not that pinching that's going on there. That'll kind of help alleviate, take some of the gravity weight off your body that's pinching those muscles together. Also, it's kind of a nice support now that I have it here. I think I'll do this more. We're at our halfway point. This is our final minute. Maybe this pose is allowing you to go just a little bit deeper into stretching those hip flexors, not just the sartorius, but your psoas is stretching here. Your quad is stretching. All these big muscles that work the hip and the knee. And these muscles get tight so easily. Right. Coming out of the pose, move slowly. You don't want to move a hip flexor too fast. I'd like to come again, sitting back onto my heel, pulling the legs out from this posture and coming back onto our hands. Now, if you need to kind of stretch the legs out to shake that pose off, feel free to do so. We're going to work a little bit into the spine and the shoulders now, the other ball and socket joint. So we're going to go in a melting heart. From here, I like to just simply walk my hands forward like a puppy dog pose and come down. If you want to place your forehead on the mat, that's great too. You want to grab a pillow to support underneath your chest or to support underneath your forehead. That's a really awesome modification and really good for the nervous system as well. Go ahead and start my timer here. We'll be in melting heart for 3 minutes. This is a big opening of the shoulders and we haven't really worked into those too much. If we did the eagle arms, maybe a little. But just feeling it's probably opening up the sides, the neck. This is our halfway point. And final 30 seconds. Last leg of this stretch. All right, I'm gonna have us all take a nice big inhale. And on the exhale, begin to come out of this pose. I walk my hands up, back to the tabletop. Ooh, that felt good. Releasing with a few more cat-cows. And then from here, we're gonna make our way to our back, to the back. Take a second to So from supported fish, can you hear me, Greta?
You did cut out for a sec, but I can hear you now.
Okay. Cool.
Supported fish.
Back supported fish. So for supported fish, grab a block a pillow, a couple pillows, couple blankets, and you want to place it on the mat where your two shoulder blades are going to meet. Like this. You can have your head hanging off, or if that's a little too much for your neck, grab another pillow and simply support your head here. The idea of this is you want to open up the front of the chest to allow the arms and the pec muscles to really get a nice opening. Now with the legs, you can keep them long. You can have your knees flexed and have the feet on the ground. Or what I like to do, another great sartorius stretch, I'll really bring it back to this muscle, is have them in a butterfly or a cross-legged. And that gives you actually just this opening of this kind of this pelvic area as well. A real opening of the front side of the body here. And starting the timer. And this is our halfway point. I always say this when we're in this pose, and many teachers do, and I think they say it because it's true, but this is a really vulnerable pose. Like, there aren't many instances in the animal kingdom where it would be safe to do this pose. You know, your organs are exposed, your heart is exposed. Not only exposed to danger, but exposed to elements, exposed to the cold, exposed to the heat. And these are the organs, you know, you're really, your brain is always trying to protect. And by opening up these muscles that get so tense, and by, you know, practicing this kind of calmness and quiet in a vulnerable position, helps us prepare for when we are out in the world and, you know, we're met with anything that causes us to feel vulnerable. We can maybe react to it calmly and with a little more preparation. It also sometimes reminds me of my cat when she's really relaxed. And she's full belly out. All right, coming out of this pose, it's good to move slowly. So whatever leg variation you went with, I like to come back to my feet on the ground for some support. And remove the block or the pillow from underneath your back. You do this over the course of a couple breaths. Readjusting the spine to being neutral on the mat again. Washing out the legs, giving a little twisting action to the spine. I'll pass it off to Greta Rose for the last couple postures.
Awesome, thank you. Let's find a, there we go, the pinning thing. Let's find ourselves in a tabletop. If you're in a seat or wherever you're coming into a tabletop. And from here, tucking the toes under and pressing back to downward facing dog. You can paddle out the feet here, noticing the weight in your hands, each knuckle mount. And inhale, lift the right leg up high. And exhale, come into half pigeon, bringing right knee behind right wrist, untucking the back toes, bringing the left ankle down. And when you get here, if you're experiencing anything, any pain in your knee or your ankle, and you're like, I gotta practice this on my back, like that's a great way to practice half pigeon, is on your back, taking a figure four. Right ankle on top of left thigh. Interweave the fingers at the base of your thigh or on top of the shin. But if you're taking half pigeon, maybe finding some support for the right glutes so the hips are really neutral. And then slowly beginning to walk your hands forward. Maybe you come onto forearms. You might find some support for the head. You can rest the forehead on a block, or you can rest the chest on a pillow if you still have that nearby. And we will hold for time. And this is the halfway point. And knowing that there are a lot of muscles that thread through this part of your body. And noticing if it's a physical sensation that jumps out at you. Pulling your edge back if you need to, if it's too much. And also channeling that receptiveness, that compassion we talked at the beginning of class. This is a really, it's a big hip opener. And final minute. And slowly begin to discern how you would like to exit. Walk the hands back towards your hips. Tuck under the back toe, engage your back leg. And send the right leg up high. This release is one of my favorites. So you can roll the ankle, you can roll the hip around. Release a groaning sensation. And then plant the right foot back down when you're ready. And we'll shift on to the other side. Inhale, lift the left leg up high. And exhale, half pigeon on the left side, left knee behind left wrist. Untucking the back toe, bringing the knee down. Maybe you flip over onto the back and practice it that way. Maybe you're already on your back, you're just switching your legs out. And setting up this side. And leaving room for it to be different. And I originally had deer and stag kind of linked up these last two poses. But I think it's kind of hard to do so much hip stuff on the right side and then switch to the left side just because they are so tender and oftentimes tight. And so we're kind of getting a little break on the left side before we get into the twist. And you're so close to the ground, feeling the weight of your body touching the mat or the carpet, the blanket, whatever you're using. Not only connecting to the grounding and nurturing energy of the earth as it holds you, but I've been thinking for some reason about earth for quite a while as just kind of like just the soil, like just the dense nutrient earth. And I was thinking today, like earth is so much more. It's like, it's the trees and like the parts that are so beautiful, and connecting to that aliveness of whatever it is outside. Maybe it's the water, maybe it's leaves, maybe it's birds, but connecting to that as well. And maybe that's just like too much for you, but maybe really trying to be open to it. This is the halfway point. Final minute. Slowly, gently, softly walk the hands back towards your hip. Tuck under that back toe. Extend the left leg high and up. Taking any free movement you need to. Whatever feels nice, whatever feels inviting. And then sinking the hips down. Bringing the knees down. And coming into a seat. And we're gonna close class with a deer or stag pose. We won't be holding it for super long, just to stay within the confines of this class time. But planting the feet on the ground and maybe bringing them a little bit wider than they would be hips width distance, and then letting the legs fall right, left. We've already been here quite a few times. Maybe thinking about the sartorius, which just sounds like a cousin of like a brontosaurus or something. It just sounds like a dinosaur. And then the next time the legs come to the right, let them go all the way down. And then I like to kind of scoop my glutes back by kind of lifting myself and letting the legs come down. So they kind of create these 90-degree angles, or you could think of it as the shins being like perpendicular to each other. You may have to manually maneuver like where the legs are going. Inhale to find length in your spine. And exhale, twist the torso, twist around so you're facing the back. And slowly begin to walk your hands forward. And this may be the full range of your motion. You may be able to walk the arms out, maybe bring the forearms down. And I've also found it to be kind of interesting to experiment with where you bring your chest. Like this might be kind of where you're at. I've also found it to be extremely satisfying to fold over like the shin or maybe your knee. So just arriving, and I'll set our timer. And this is halfway point and final minute. And press the palms into the ground. Extend your arms. Walk your hands back towards your hips. Unswivel your neck. Unswivel your chest. And take that windshield wipering motion with the legs as a release, and then let the legs fall down towards the left, maybe scooting your glutes back, creating those lines with the legs. Inhale to find length in the spine. And exhale, twist towards the left, and begin to lower your chest down to the ground. Of course, you can always bring the chest onto a pillow. And if you experimented with the degree that you were angling your torso, you're welcome to, of course, do that again on this side. And this is halfway, final minute. And we're coming up on the last about 10 seconds here of class. You can start lifting yourself, or I want to give the option today, like the chest is already pretty close to the ground. It would be pretty easy to just extend the left leg out behind you. If you would like to take Shavasana as sleeping infant or napping baby, of course, you're just kind of welcome to transition there. But otherwise, slowly beginning to lift your head, chest, and walk your hands back towards your pelvis, and coming to lay on your back. And if this does feel too open or exposed, of course, you can lay on your side, or maybe you did want to take the sleeping infant napping baby, which is just bending your right knee, bringing the left cheek to the mat. Either way, I will give you some time here, and I will guide you up and out when it is time. And really softly, almost so I couldn't detect it if I was looking at you, begin to move. And then let the movement grow bigger. Let it ripple into your arms if you started with your fingertips, or your ankles if you started with your toes. Maybe you bounce the legs a little, just inviting motion, activity back into the body. And if you're practicing in sleeping infant or napping baby, making your way to the side body. You're on your back, extending the arms above you, bringing the knees towards your chest, and choosing if you want to roll over onto the right or the left side. The left side is associated with the qualities we were nurturing during this practice. The right is going to be more active, but really both directions are wonderful. And coming into this fetal position and extending a wave of gratitude to yourself for doing such a healing practice, and a practice that is so beneficial for your joints, and having an awareness about that and knowing that you're kind of furthering your range of motion for years to come, as long as it's a continuous practice. And honoring the lineage of this practice, this is a Yin Yoga practice, and Yin is a word that is used in meridian theory, in Chinese theory, and also Taoist theory. And a lot of the Yin poses are like some of the earliest forms of yoga poses that do appear in the lineage that comes from India. And so honoring those traditions and incorporating that into your practice is super important. And then also honoring the land that I occupy here, the unceded ancestral land of the Coast Salish Duwamish people. And
I'm actually coming to you from New Mexico, and this is the territory of the Mescalero Apache and Chiricahua Apache people, and the Apache Nation territory of New Mexico, Texas, and modern day Mexico.
yes, thank you. I love the land acknowledgement, and when we shift states, you learn so many more names. And gently pressing yourself up to a seat if you weren't already there. And if it feels authentic to you, meet with hands at heart center. Maybe there's another gesture or mudra that speaks to you. But this gesture in particular, it represents non-dualism. And then bringing hands from heart center to third eye, strengthening connection between the hearts and the relationship you feel with that. Maybe it is compassion, how you interface with others, yourself, and also third eye, intuition and vision. And bowing forward to seal in your practice, honoring the whole self, both the luminous and shadowy aspects. Peace. And thank you. Thank you so much for being here tonight.